Hello there, everybody, and welcome into Pick Up Sports Talk after a 2-week break. I'm Spencer Stein.
And I'm Dylan Floor, filling in for Brandon.
Yeah, so we're going to jump right into things. We've had a lot happen over the 2 weeks. College football bowl season, NFL's in full. We're about to get into the playoffs. Playoff pictures filling up. We have one more week to go, so let's just jump right in the NFL last week in review. Shout out to the Bears, beat the sorry Giants 29-3.
You know, I feel like Matt Nagy, the news of him planning to get fired, really sparked the team.
I think they were excited to go out there and play hard. Great defensive effort. I think we could carry that into next year. Good defense, field some weapons, and start winning.
I agree. I think we need to start working around Fields, make the offense work for him.
Even though we did win that game with Dalton, I will say.
We did look good with Dalton.
And the week before, I think we looked even better with Foles. But
Foles might be the guy moving forward.
He might be the guy.
But we'll see.
But let's get to the real games. The biggest thing in football actually wasn't necessarily in a game. It was Bucs-Jets. The Bucs were trailing by a lot. And one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, Antonio Brown quit the team mid-game, threw his jersey into the stands, ran through the end zone, walked off the field, said he's out. It was after a fight with Bruce Arians, and the team says he's no longer a Buc. So what did you make of that whole weird situation?
You know, that was really interesting. I think Antonio Brown's had some problems for a while. Mm-hmm. My opinion is that they kind of stem from that Vontaze Burfict hit.
I agree.
In the playoffs. It seems like it started after that. It was pretty crazy. I haven't seen anything like it. He dropped a song right after the game as well, which was another interesting PR move.
Yeah, I just think the only thing to say is he's unwell, and obviously we hope for the best from him. But I think his football career's over. I don't think I want to see another team sign him. And people are talking about teams giving him another chance because of his talent, and he's so talented. For a period of time, he was the best wide receiver in football. But I think that's got to be the end.
Yeah, I think he could have gone down as one of the greatest receivers ever if he hadn't gone down this path of causing trouble wherever he went. Mm-hmm. And I think Tom Brady was his best chance because it seemed like he was the one that was willing to give him a lot of those second chances.
Yeah, and it seemed like Brady was actually his friend, too.
Yeah, it seemed like they were close.
Well, do you think he's going to get another chance?
I doubt it, honestly. I think that this was kind of the last straw for teams.
I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah. But let's talk about the game more. The Bucs were trailing by a lot. The Jets made a questionable call late in the game to go for it on fourth down. And they had a bad play call. They tried to go up the middle with Zach Wilson on 4th and 2. That's what lost them the game. But the Bucs, we saw them weakened. They now lost Antonio Brown. Mike Evans is playing hurt. They lost Chris Godwin a while ago. Fournette may or may not return. The defense is weak. So do you think, though, shorthanded, they can still make it out of the NFC and compete?
I doubt it. I think that part of what made them so good was their receiving core in particular, and their running game has been an additional plus this year. And with Godwin out and now Brown gone, I think they're pretty depleted there. And
I agree.
Those offensive weapons are no longer...
Yeah, and also now that we saw Rojo went down too, so they really have no running game. Cyril Grayson stepped up, though, in the end. 2 receptions, touchdown right in the last 2 plays. I think he'll step up come playoff time, and I do think they can get a win, but I don't necessarily think they could compete. We'll list a few more NFC teams, talk about who has the best chance at competing with Green Bay, but I just want to go right off the bat and say that I think Green Bay is the heavy favorite in the NFC, and they're my Super Bowl favorite right now. I don't see a team playing as well as Green Bay.
I would definitely agree. I think Green Bay is really hot right now, and I don't think they have any reason to stop.
Yeah, definitely. And one more thing about the Bucs before we move on is that their defense is really what made their team last year and what won the championship. And we saw Levante David's been out a while. And Devin White is my favorite player on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a linebacker, but he can't perform at his highest standard without the other linebacker, Levante David, being there. Shaq Barrett also, I think, has missed the last 2 games with the sprained ACL, MCL. So we'll see if they can return Sean Murphy Bunting too in the secondary. Let's move on to different NFC teams. The biggest matchup of this week in the NFC was probably Cardinals-Cowboys. Both teams are going to make the playoffs. Cardinals 25, Cowboys 22 in that game. Do you think either of these teams have a chance at even winning a playoff game?
I think that they can maybe win one game, but I think they showed a lot of their weaknesses throughout this whole game, and it seemed to me that the Cardinals didn't win as much as they just didn't lose as bad.
Agreed.
They were both playing really poorly, and they just played less poorly.
I honestly do not trust the Cardinals at all, even after they won this game. They've looked terrible the last couple of weeks. Kyler's looked worst after being an MVP favorite.
Yeah.
So I don't think they can win a playoff game. They're not even going to win their division, so I don't think they're going to get a home playoff game. That's going to be bad. Cowboys, on the other hand, lost this game, and looking at their schedule, if you look at their wins, yes, I think they're 11-4, 11-5, but what's interesting is that all their wins seem to be against horrible teams. I mean, they're in a bad division. They've beat the Eagles once. I don't think they're going to beat them next week, not to preface our predictions. They've beat the football team twice, and they beat the Giants twice. Those are not good wins. Their losses have been bad. They've lost to the Chiefs. They've lost to the Raiders. And these aren't horrible losses, but they're against good teams which shows in the playoffs. I don't think they'll be able to compete. My hot prediction is going to be that they lose in the first round, but it all depends on matchups. We could see these two teams play again in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the Cowboys are definitely the better team out of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of their losses haven't been that bad. Like the Chiefs lost week 1, Dak's first week. Like you can't really hate on that. I think that Gallup going down is a big thing, though. Their 3 receivers being really good was really nice for Dak.
Yeah.
A lot of weapons.
And Amari Cooper, though, hasn't looked good to me.
No, he's not.
2 weeks ago, I think he had a big game, but I think he needs to step up, especially with Gallup down.
Yeah.
CD's their number 1 receiver
I
still.
would definitely agree.
And I think it's time for them to switch to Pollard as the number 1 back. I think Ezekiel Elliott's past his prime, and I think this year they could stick with their 2-back system. I think next year going forward, Pollard's got to be their future back.
Pollard seems so good whenever he has the ball. He's very explosive, and he gives their offense something that Zeke does not seem to be giving them.
Yeah, and he's also playing well as a kick returner.
Yeah.
So we'll see how those two teams develop. One more NFC team. The Los Angeles Rams beat the Ravens 20-19. They were trailing that whole game against a backup quarterback, even though Tyler Huntley isn't terrible, the Ravens backup. Rams did come out and win that game 2019. They are looking like they're going to win the division. But can they advance? How good are they? Because we've seen them be so good. There was a point where I said they were the best team in the NFC, and their defense starting to look better. But we've also seen games like this.
I think that it largely depends on Stafford. I mean, he didn't play well against the Ravens, and I think that when he does play well, with the addition of Odell now, who's looking really good, Von Miller's starting to step up a little
got a
bit.
nice
He had that sack at the end. Yeah, I think they could go either way. Depends.
Yeah, and Matthew Stafford, interesting stats. He's thrown 4 pick sixes this year, highest in the league. So I do think a lot of it depends on him. But let's be honest. We don't see any of these teams beating Green Bay. But out of all the teams we just talked about, who do you think challenges Green Bay the most?
I would say, given how they play and their defense, probably the Rams. If they're on their A game, I think they're the team that could beat them.
I have to completely agree. I think when they're on their A game, they actually do have a shot.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough going through Green Bay. It's cold there now that they've clinched the 1 seed. Every game's going to be there. But I've talked about how I don't like the Cowboys, and I don't think they could advance. I don't think any of the wild card teams are great. Don't underestimate the Eagles. They've played well down the stretch. I think they did clinch. They will make it, and they could make some waves if Jalen Hurts is on his A game. And I do think they have a better chance than, this is a hot take, than maybe even the Cardinals do. The Cardinals have looked bad, but I don't like the Niners. We'll see if they clinch.
I do like the Eagles as well, but another team that I really like, moving on to another thing for next week, is I like the 49ers a lot. I think that they have a different look than a lot of the teams playing, and I think that could scare some people.
So let's get into this prediction. Next week, we have San Francisco's playing the Rams. New Orleans is playing Atlanta. San Francisco gets in with a win or a New Orleans loss. So please predict those 2 games for me.
I think that San Francisco is going to come out with a
ferocious attitude.
I think they know that they have to win this game or really want to, and because I doubt New Orleans loses to Atlanta in a winner go home situation. So I think they're going to come out. I don't know where that game is.
I think it's in LA, actually.
With it being in LA, I do think that'll make it harder because I think the Rams fans will come out and make that pretty difficult. And I think it depends on how Stafford plays. Yeah,
definitely. My issue with that is that I think San Francisco is so much better than New Orleans, but I really just don't think they could get the job done here, and I do think New Orleans can beat Atlanta. I think New Orleans is going to get in, but that really disappoints me because there's just such a worse team, New Orleans and San Francisco. And I think San Francisco has a shot in the playoffs, but I think New Orleans is going to end up making it. Last thing I want to mention before we move on to the AFC is Tampa Bay. I don't think will do well. Everyone's talking about Tom Brady 24/7. I wish Brandon was here because he's obsessed with Tom Brady. But the thing is that he has won 7 Super Bowls, most all time. He's the GOAT. But that's in, 21 seasons? So even though that's the best you could do in football, he still only wins Super Bowl 1/3 of the time. So I think this one of those years will where he will have an early exit. I think that he could win a game, because I think this is the first time all year I thought the NFC is actually weaker than the AFC. But right now it looks like no one can compete with Green Bay.
Yeah, I think Tom Brady's is aging. I know it's hard to say, but he is. And something that's helped him is having so many good weapons on offense and such a great defense to carry him the last year. And I think that with less of that now, it's going to be hard for him.
I definitely agree. I still think he has Gronk. You never know. That seems to be all he needs.
Yeah, you can never count him out, though.
No, never can. Let's move on to the AFC. The best game of the week, in my opinion, in all of football was Bengals-Chiefs. Bengals 34, Chiefs 31. This was an upset. A lot of people were picking the Bengals. I was on the Chiefs. This surprised me. It's not that they won, it's the manner in which they won. It was a comeback from down 14. Jamar Chase had the most yards a rookie has ever had in an NFL game. I think it was 200-something. That was crazy. I think he should win Rookie of the Year. He had 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Insane fantasy performance. But how good are the Bengals? Like, what's their ceiling?
I think the Bengals are a really good team. Do I think they can win a Super Bowl this year? No. But I think they could compete and definitely make it out of the first round, maybe even the second, depending on how they play.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll make it to the Super Bowl. I do think they have a really good future, though, and that can be something for... And have a dynasty set.
And who would have thought they would win this division, the AFC North? I mean, they were last place last year. I think more people said the Ravens would win or the Steelers would win or teams like that. So that was crazy. But just that they have all these weapons, as you said, and they're all so young, and I don't think this is their year. But going forward, they have Jamar Chase, they have Joe Mixon, they have Joe Burrow. That's all you need. Joe Burrow, I think, is a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL. And he's just in his second year. I can say definitely he's better than Herbert. I think it's really close.
Yeah.
I think the clear-cut top 3 in the NFL right now are Rodgers 1, Brady 2, Mahomes 3. Who knows how much longer Brady has. After that, it's all up for debate. You could say Josh Allen's 4, maybe Stafford's 5. Then is where I put Burrow. I'd put him ahead of Lamar. I'd put him ahead of Dak. I'd put him ahead of Herbert. So they have a lot set up. I think they can win a game. But let's talk about the Chiefs real quick before we all jump on this Bengals bandwagon, just because they've won now 3 in a row. The Chiefs have had won 7 or 8 in a row. Are they still the clear-cut favorites? Because up until a week ago, it was like Chiefs-Packers, in my mind, was definitely. And all year, the AFC's been the Chiefs' conference, and it's kind of been a bad conference. Now all of the titles have turned, and the AFC seems to be the more up for grabs.
I still think that the Chiefs are definitely the best team in that conference and that they should be able to win. Depends. I don't know who's going to end up with the bye in that conference, them or Tennessee. But especially if they do have it, I like their chances to make it. They have experience. I don't think Mahomes wants to lose again like he did. And I think he's going to come out and make sure that doesn't happen. I think a lot of it depends on their defense. We've seen a lot of ups and downs from them. If they can be what they were for those 7 or 8 weeks that they were just winning straight, I think they'll be great. But if they show what they did those first couple of weeks, I think it could be tough.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're the favorites. I think they're going to make the Super Bowl, but I think the Titans have a great shot. If the Titans have a bye, Derrick Henry's coming back. The probably best player in football, non-quarterback. The fact that Jonathan Taylor's in the MVP conversation, he was having a much worse season than Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is still like 6th in rushing yards, and he missed half the year. That's insane, and they've been playing well without him. They've gotten into this bye without playing him half the year. I think they're going to go get the bye. They're going to have a much easier route, and we're going to see him in the AFC Championship. They just need to win one game to get to the AFC Championship. If they could beat the Chiefs at home in that game, I would not be shocked. They smoked them last time they played. They have a better defense. They have a better run game. They have good receivers. A.J. Brown is back, and Ryan Tannehill is good. So I don't know who's going to win between them, but I would favor the Chiefs still.
I would agree. I think that the Chiefs will be the team that wins. I think it could be close. I know we saw that matchup.
I think early on, week 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think so. And that was a pretty good game, I remember.
It's a bit of a blowout.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, but I think we could see the story be a little different this time, and it would be a close game. I think A.J. Brown looks really good coming back. I don't think Julio's going to play.
I don't know. I think he's on IR, so we'll see if he comes back. I don't think he will. But after those two teams, I'd honestly still put the Bengals the 3. So
I would say Bengals 3. And honestly, for me, the Colts 4. I think that if they make the playoffs.
If they make it.
If they make the playoffs, which I think they will.
So let's jump into that right now before we talk about the Colts. I know you're a huge fan of the Colts. Mm-hmm. They lost to the Raiders 23-20. Carson Wentz was expected to be out. He was on the COVID list. Somehow he played, but they still lost. This week, they need to beat the Jaguars to make it. It's a tough task. Will they get it done, and what do you expect out of them in the playoffs?
I think that they will get it done. I think that the Jaguars are a pretty sorry team this year.
Yeah.
And they don't have enough with weapons, defense. Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked great.
I think in the last 3 weeks now, Trevor Lawrence has lost to Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and another quarterback from that class. So
I think he has
embarrassing.
Proved that it's a mix. I think it's a mix of situation and how good he actually is, but I do not think he looks like the best out of all of them.
So let's talk about the other side. You said the Colts will win that. I agree. What will they do in the playoffs?
I think they're a really scary team. They started off the year with a really poor record. I think it was around 1-5, 1-6. So for them to be able to be here, it shows that they're a really, really good team. They have a great defense. Darius Leonard's incredible. Jonathan Taylor has looked like the best running back with Derrick Henry out. And Wentz with Pittman and
T.Y. Hilton's back.
T.Y. Hilton had a little Hail Mary-like catch in the end zone. That was fun to see. I think they could spice things up a little bit.
I don't know. I think it's all about matchups. I'm not going to speculate too much on the playoffs because I want to wait till next week. We're going to have a huge special predicting every game. I'm super excited for that. But I agree that they are an interesting team, and I'd almost rank them above those AFC East teams just because they have a running game, they have a good passing, and they have good defense. So we'll see what happens there. The AFC now, it's so crazy. I know I said this twice, but it's so crazy how everything's shifted now. That's more interesting. So that's my prediction there. Let's talk about the AFC East real quick before we wrap up with Monday Night Football. Bills beat the Falcons 29-15. Patriots beat the Jaguars 50-10. Shocker. That's another thing. Jaguars are horrible. Both are 10-6. The Bills will clinch the division with a win, which means they'll get home field advantage. We could see them play each other in the playoffs. We don't know. But of those two teams, who do you trust more to go farther?
It's tough. I would probably lean Bills. I think they are a more talented team. And I think that putting a rookie quarterback into the playoffs, even with Belichick, is a difficult thing to do. So I think that the Bills will come out, especially if they do win and play at home. Bills Mafia is pretty crazy, so they'll definitely make that a tough task for a rookie quarterback. Yeah,
I'm actually down on both these teams. I'm not a huge fan of either of them. I trust Belichick in the playoffs, but exactly what you said, who knows with the rookie quarterback. We've seen what Josh Allen could do. Josh Allen I've not been a fan of him all year if you've been listening in, and I didn't love what he did last week. I know they won 29-15, but he had a bad interception. He had a lot of plays where he was trying to do too much by running out of the pocket and not staying in there. So I don't know how much I trust either of them, but as you said, if they're at home, that's a huge advantage. I think the Bills can advance, and before the season, they were my prediction to make the AFC Championship. Chiefs are the favorites there. Tennessee's better. The Bengals, I think, can threaten. And I'd really love to see the Bengals outplay the Patriots in the first round. I think that would be a really interesting game of young quarterbacks. And I think the Bengals would take that. So I'm kind of rooting against both these teams. If I had to choose one, I'd choose the Bills to go farther. But there's a good chance we see them head-to-head. And I think if we see them head-to-head, I give the Patriots the edge.
I think that I would probably give the Patriots the edge. We saw that game a couple weeks ago, and it was a really fun one.
I mean, the one with the bad conditions they won, but then they went back in regular conditions. Yeah. Buffalo went on the road and beat them.
We saw what Stephon Diggs had to say. That was pretty entertaining. I think that was a great game, and I personally would lean Bills. I think that they'll likely be playing in Buffalo as well.
That's a huge thing. I mean, we saw New England go in there in Buffalo and beat them once. If they beat them twice, that would be incredible. Neither of these teams are making a run. Last NFL thing. Steelers beat the Browns 26-14. We're going to get to some Baker Mayfield talking in a second, but the biggest deal is Big Ben. It was his last game at Heinz Field. He retired, and I'm just going to say my piece on him is that I know he has off-the-field issues. We're not necessarily going to talk about those, but on the field, my whole life, I've known the Steelers, Big Ben, to be their quarterback. He won 2 Super Bowls there, and I've never been a huge fan of him or his play, but what I'm going to say is it feels weird for him not to be their quarterback, and when he was walking off the field high-fiving all the fans, I got goosebumps. So it's weird to me. It feels like there's a hole in Pittsburgh with him not there, but it's not like I was a huge fan of him. So it's interesting to see him go, but what do you think the Steelers will do to move on?
I think that they need to look either to the draft or to free agency this year, obviously, and I think depending on what happens, Deshaun Watson could be a good fit. I think he's still one of the better quarterbacks, and not due to
his off-the-field issues.
Due to his off-the-field issues, I don't know if they'll be able to do that, but I think if they can, he's a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, before last year, I would have said the 2 top guys you want in the NFL, if there's like a redraft, 1 would be Mahomes, 2 would be Watson. He's insane. Any team that could get him, go for him. The next guy I would say go for is Aaron Rodgers, obviously. I will tell every team to do that. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is the best player in football. It's not close to me. He's dominant, and I love watching Aaron Rodgers. I hate to say it. I don't like him as a player because I'm a Bear fan, but the way he reads defense is unlike anything else. Before the snap, I've really been watching the last couple of games before the snap. He calls a new play at the line. It's basically undefendable. Like, he literally is so good at reading the formations, calling an audible at the line, running the perfect play, and the thing that makes him impossible on top of that is they always makes the right throw. He'll call Devontae Adams, tell him what route to run, and he could blindly know where Adams is going to be, throw it perfectly. That combo is unstoppable. That's why I think the Packers are going to win the Super Bowl. But I think any team that could get him, they should. My hot take on the Steelers, though, the guy they should go, Kenny Pickett. I'm not a huge fan of any of the quarterbacks in this draft. Malik Willis is fine, so is Matt Corral. I think Kenny Pickett, he's played at Pitt. He is a good system QB. I think if Pittsburgh gets him, that would be a huge deal. And I haven't ever seen him trade up for a quarterback because they've had one since 2004. Yeah. But I think this is the time they should go all in and trade up for Pickett. Teams might draft Corral or Willis ahead of him, so he could fall, especially with the Steelers missing the playoffs. But I think they should do everything in their power to go get him. I think he fits their system well. He's a city guy. I love seeing hometown guys. Kenny Pickett should be the Steelers' next quarterback, and he could usher in a new era there for years.
I like that a lot. He looked great at Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. It was kind of sad that we didn't get to see him or Kenneth Walker play in that last game, but after what happened with Matt Corral, I kind of understand.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I do think that he could be a great system quarterback. He kind of has a Big Ben play style in the pocket, and I think that he could be their guy going forward. I do think that Aaron Rodgers will stay in Green Bay, though. Mm-hmm. I think that they've kind of fixed their relationship.
And I think if Rodgers leaves Green Bay, could end up out west where he wants to be, like Denver. I'd love to see Rodgers in San Francisco. I think that team's unbeatable if they have Aaron Rodgers.
Totally
but Trey Lance looked good. I think Jimmy G should stay there just because you could say anything you want about him, but every 3 games he plays in San Francisco, he wins 2. And Trey Lance really impressed me, but I think you guys stick with that with Jimmy B. That's a debate for another day, though. Let's get to the other side. The Browns had high expectations, and they missed the playoffs. Baker Mayfield, the worst season of his life. He played horrible in that last game. He kind of turned on a little at the end. Do you think he's done?
I wouldn't say he's done. I think that Cleveland might stick with him for a little longer.
What do you think they should do?
I do not think they should. I feel like they came in with such high expectations for him, with him being the number 1 pick, a Heisman Trophy winner, and he is just disappointed and regressed every year, it seems. And it seems like he's caused issues with players on their team, things like that. Like, sometimes he's not fully focused on football. I would try to move away from him, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's bad. I think he's done for. I think he's a below-average NFL quarterback. And Brandon said this to me. I think it's perfect. He's like Johnny Manziel without the off-the-field issues. Like, how much better is he really than that? He runs around, but he makes some good throws. He has a huge arm. And I think as a fan or as a person who's watching, I would say they should get rid of him. But what I think I would honestly do if I was the Browns GM is give him 1 more year, just because he played this year hurt. We saw a lot of the team go down. He didn't have great receivers. I think this offseason's an opportunity to build back up everything around him, give him 1 more chance. Maybe bring a guy like Jameis to provide competition, or even Bridgewater. I think Baker's going to get 1 more year. I think he should, just because of the injury. But I think next, and also because this year's draft, I think's weak, the quarterback class. Mm-hmm. So I think I'd like to see him get 1 more year. I think he's going to fail, and then I think the next year in the draft, they'll go get someone, maybe Bryce Young, maybe Caleb Williams.
I think that if they can wait another year, that would be better for them, because that draft class does look really good at the quarterback position. And I also think that while I hate Baker because I was a big Odell Beckham fan. Mm-hmm. Watching him come in was very disappointing. I do think they'll still stick with him, though. It's hard for a team to give up on their number 1 pick like that, especially because he is still pretty young. And
what the Browns need to do to get better is go back to the run game. When we saw them in the playoffs win last year, it was all through the run game. This game we saw Dearness Johnson, through the first half, had more snaps than Nick Chubb, more carries. Kareem Hunt's been hurt, and Nick Chubb was hurt for a portion. But I think next year they need to go back to ground and pound with Chubb and Hunt. And I think their running game almost hid Baker Mayfield's pitfalls in previous years. So if they could hide them anymore, keep going for it, keep handing it off to Chubb and Hunt, get them healthy next year. And I think they can come back and win that division and get a playoff spot next year if they do that.
It's very hard to stop a healthy Chubb and Hunt combined.
Oh, yeah.
Because you always have a Pro Bowl caliber running back.
Kareem Hunt's Pro Bowl caliber, by the way.
I totally agree. I think that you always have a Pro Bowl level running back at pretty much full stamina in the backfield, and that's really hard to stop.
And Kareem Hunt in the passing game is insane. I think he needs a chance to get out of Cleveland, go be the number 1 back on a team again like we saw in Kansas City. So that'll be interesting. Let's move on to college. And I'm shocked. We actually started with the NFL, but the biggest storyline of the weekend was probably the college football playoff. You see Dylan here in a Michigan sweatshirt. We'll start with them. All year long, I was telling you guys, Michigan, they're fine. They can't compete in those big games. Georgia smoked them. They beat them down 34-11. It was more of a blowout than Bama-Cincy. What do you make of that game? I assume you watched it all. Might have turned it off early, but what do you see in the part you watched?
I did watch it all, sadly, and I think that a lot of it had to do with the quarterback play, and the offensive line did not look like the best offensive line in the country like people thought. They got dominated by Georgia's defense overall. Cade McNamara did not look good. They looked a lot better with J.J. McCarthy in.
Yeah.
I think that he should be the quarterback going forward for them if they want to continue to have success in the future as well.
Yeah, Cade McNamara, I think, has played his final game at Michigan. I love how everyone was so excited about their O-line. They're going to stop Georgia. Georgia's defense is elite. I think Nakobe Dean is the best player in college football. I'm going to go out and say it. I thought this year's Heisman race was weak. I thought Bryce Young was fine. He didn't look great against Cincinnati. Kenny Pickett was good, but how much did he really do? I would have loved to see it go to a defensive player. I thought Will Anderson and and Hutchinson, were up there, but I thought Nakobe Dean really this year has been the best, and he showed that off in the Michigan game. He led Georgia's defense. He made plays from the linebacker position. He reminds me of Roquan Smith, and I think he was also a linebacker at Georgia, and I think Nakobe Dean should be a high NFL draft pick. Jordan Davis obviously dominant on that line. Their defense is just elite. There's nothing Michigan could do, and early on, Harbaugh put in he took out McNamara for a couple plays and put in, what's his name? The quarterback. J.J. McCarthy. And J.J. for 2 plays. And I thought this is way too early to switch to J.J. And then he put back in McNamara, but that seemed to backfire. So in the end, we saw J.J. McCarthy play well, and I think going forward he'll be their quarterback. But I really don't see Michigan making it to the playoff for a long time again.
I think it's going to be tough. They have a lot of what made their defense great going away. I think their offensive line and running game still could be really good. They have a great freshman running back as well. And I think JJ could be a building piece of the future. He's their highest rated quarterback to come in forever. And I think that there's still stuff to build around and be hopeful for, but I do think that it's unlikely we'll see them have a better season than this one.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get to the other game, another SEC dominant game. Cincy 6, Bama 27 all year. I was saying once again, this is why I was a Cincy hater all year. Everyone loves Cincinnati. I said it's just going to ruin New Year's Eve for everyone because they can't compete with the SEC. But they did deserve that spot in the end just because teams like Oklahoma State and Notre Dame had a bad year. Do you think this hurts like the group of 5 conferences?
I think it does hurt because it showed that there is still a large gap. However, I do think that if you look at both games, you could just say that it's just a gap between the SEC and everybody else, and that kind of does help, but they did not look good, especially on offense. They couldn't get anything done. Desmond Ridder was getting passes swatted at the line over and over. They just did not look like they belonged there.
And I thought this whole group of 5 thing, since the playoff was invented, it's been a lose-lose. Everyone's been obsessed with getting them in there, and it's like, okay, if you don't put them in there, they're never going to. And everyone said Cincy being in, there's a huge step forward. But I knew the second they put in one of those teams, they'd get eaten by Bama. It's the same thing with UCF a bunch of years ago when they were undefeated and wanted to be in. It's like, it's a lose-lose. You either don't put them in or you put them in and they get smoked. So this is, I think, a step forward and then backward. The SEC is elite, as you said. I mean, all year I've said Ole Miss might be the 3rd best team in the country. We just don't know because these teams are in. And obviously, Ole Miss lost their game. That's because, as you said, Matt Corral went down. Bama's great. Bama's probably still the best team in the country. That's why they were the 1 seed. Their defense is elite. Bryce Young didn't look great. He looked fine. It was against a good Cincy defense. So let's move on to our championship predictions. Championship's Monday. It's coming up. Yeah. Georgia versus Bama. Who you got?
Right now, I have Bama. I think we saw this game not that long ago, and we saw that Bama came out with a vengeance to prove that Georgia wasn't the untouchable team that we kind of thought they were, and a lot of people were saying. And it seemed like with everything that they have, it was too much for Georgia, and they were kind of able to crack the defense a little bit, in a sense. Their running game looked great against Cincinnati, whose specialty is not stopping the run, it's more so stopping the pass, but still. And I think that with everything we know, great coaching, obviously, for Alabama. Kirby Smart is still a good coach, but I don't think he compares. I would give the nod to Alabama. Yeah,
so here's the thing. By the way, we forgot to mention Georgia, James Cook, Dalvin Cook's brother, had an insane game, so he could tear it up. We'll see. Everything in me is saying go Georgia. Georgia's looked better to me in every game I've watched except for when they played each other. I think they honestly have a better defense, and I've rarely been able to say that about teams playing Bama. Yes, Bama has Will Anderson. They have a lot of high picks, but I think Nakobe Dean's elite. I think they have a good run stop, and I think a lot of what Bama does is run, and I've not loved Bryce Young all year. You know, I know he won the Heisman, and I know everyone's going to say you're really hating on the Heisman winner, but I don't know how many great games I've seen out of them. I mean, dating back to when they lost to Texas A&M, it was a bad game out of him. And given all of that I've said, we've seen this before. And last time they played, Bama beat them. I have to go with Bama. I know it sounds crazy after saying all that. In every game except for that game, I would say Georgia's the better team and Georgia would actually kill them. And I think it's honestly going to be lower scoring than that game. I don't trust Stetson Bennett against Bama's defense, even though I think he's underrated. I said that last week when I was doing my bowl predictions. I think Stetson Bennett's underrated. But Saban knows how to stop walk-on quarterbacks like that. And Saban's only loss against an assistant coach was against Jimbo Fisher this year. Other than that, I think he's like 38-1, something insane. And he's beaten Kirby Smart over and over. I don't remember a time where Georgia beat them. So I just got to go with that. Even though everything in me says Georgia's a better team, we've seen this game before. We've seen Bama beat them, and I think they're going to do it again.
Yeah, this is a year that I think Alabama doesn't look so untouchable as they do in the past. They almost lost to Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Which was horrific. I think that they are not as good of a team.
We've seen one great game out of them.
Yeah, but I do think that Nick Saban's not gonna. No. I think history does.
He'll leave it all on the field.
I would definitely agree.
And if we saw them play Cincy preseason and win this game, we would say it was terrible, just because everyone's seen Cincy be so good against these bummy athletic conference teams, whatever they're in. People think they're that good. I think that wasn't an impressive win. They looked terrible against A&M, terrible against Auburn. They've had one really good game, though I think it's against who they're playing. Let's get into the other bowls. Biggest game, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe the most entertaining was the Rose Bowl. Ohio State 48, Utah 45. Utah was killing them. I think it was 14-0. It was 21-7. They kept being up. But there was one unstoppable force in Ohio State, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was probably their third receiver all year. They have Chris Olave, they have Garrett Wilson. Smith-Njigba, they might all be first-round picks. I've never seen three of the same position on the same team all be first-round picks. He had 15 receptions for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. I've never seen this in any college game, let alone the Rose Bowl. Rose Bowl record in receptions and yards. Jamar Chase didn't even do this in the NFL. I mean, that was insane. What do you make of this game? I know the bowl games are kind of losing meaning, but we all watched this one.
It hates me to say it because I'm a Michigan fan, but that Stroud and Jigba connection looks so deadly, and I know next year that he's going to be the only receiver out of the three there. Still, as he still has another year he has to play. And I think that could be a historic season for him as a receiver and what records he can break. I think he showed that he might have been the best receiver out of those three. He stepped up when the other two were out, and I think that was really impressive.
Yeah, and Ohio State sure as hell I think will be in the playoff next year. That was a bad game against Michigan. I think they'll win it coming up. Let's move on to the Sugar Bowl. Baylor Ole Miss. This game I was most excited about. Let me down. Ole Miss, Matt Corral didn't sit out. I was happy with that decision, but then he got hurt, which shows all it's behind it. Baylor won 21-7. They almost lost, even with Ole Miss playing with the backup quarterback. But I want to hear your opinion on if players should sit or not.
I hate it for the love of the game. I think that disappoints. I feel like the Peach Bowl wasn't a game that anyone wanted to see because the best players weren't playing. And that's really disappointing when you have top 10 teams not being fun to watch.
Yeah.
In the biggest games as well. I do think, though, that it makes sense where they're coming from a business standpoint. We saw Matt Corral have a scary injury. Luckily, he's going to be okay, and it won't affect his draft stock, but it does prove why a lot of the players might want to see.
I used to be fully in favor of always play, and this changed things for me. I think Greg McElroy, who was on Scott Van Pelt a couple days ago, said it best. He said in his opinion, it's totally up to the player, and if you are more concerned with your career long term and you want to sit out, and that's what's best for you and your family, great, go for it. I totally support you because the NFL is what matters. These bowl games, when you're older, it's what matters where you get drafted, what team you get to play for, how much money you make. But if you want to go out there and play with your teammates, I also, once again, fully support you and respect you because I think that's a great move, playing for your team and trying to win that game. Otherwise, it's like, where do you draw the line? Players could start sitting out half the college football season after proving their draft stock. So I really think it could go either way. I support college players either way. But I think this Matt Corral injury was scary, but I really hope it doesn't affect his draft stock.
I agree, and I think that it makes sense that players might want to sit from the business standpoint, but that they also might want to play because they've devoted their lives to the past 3 or 4 years to that college and their fan base. I do think that what this says more so is that the college football playoff needs to look at everything and realize, okay, these bowl games outside of the semifinals are losing their meaning completely, and we might need to switch it up.
Yeah, and also, I'm going to do a whole college rant right here. I'm really angry with the NCAA about that because I really liked when the Bulls had meeting, and now that they don't, just ruins a lot of the spirit of the sport. And I've been so anti-expansion of the playoff, but after watching these games, I think it might be interesting to see the good teams get eliminated early. A lot of non-college football fans are fully in favor of that, people who haven't watched the sport forever. And I think they could include all these games, and there are a lot more players will play. But I think all of college sports, honestly, is going downhill. I think players want to get paid earlier. They'll go to leagues like the G League where they can get paid, not worry about getting hurt. And just such a shame because, like, March Madness, for example, is the best sporting event in all of sports, in my opinion. And all of this stuff, players aren't wanting to do anymore. And it's not the players' fault whatsoever, but the leagues aren't really aiding it at all. And I also don't like how, like, in college football now, the SEC is becoming dominant, and they're just letting anyone in. I think they might need realignment. So everything seems to be going downhill a little, but college football, I will still say, I think is better than the NFL, watching those games.
I could debate that. I'm not really sure where I sit on that, honestly. I go back and forth. But I do think it's time for them to look at things and say, okay, we need to maybe expand maybe to an 8 or 12 team system for that playoff, because first off, I think March Madness, I would agree, is the most exciting sports event, and they can kind of recreate that in a sense. And the NFL playoffs are up there as well because it is one and done. You're out if you lose, and I think that adds a lot of interest to people that maybe aren't as big of fans as well.
Yeah, but for me, I've been kind of against this for a while because I don't want to see these college kids playing these many more games. So I wouldn't want to see it be expanded. I'm a fan of like 8 teams. I know it's probably gonna go to 12, but I think 8 would be interesting. I really don't know where I stand on this. It makes the sport more interesting, but I just love bowl games, and every semifinal, every playoff game you add gets the value of these games less and less. But the kids still care, and a lot of people who don't watch college football are like, why do these bowl games even matter? So it's difficult for me to explain those, but I just don't know where this is headed. We'll see later. A couple more games to get to. Oklahoma State 37, Notre Dame 35. Notre Dame blew a huge lead. Any quick thoughts on this game?
I think that Oklahoma State was the better team. I think that they would have definitely made it if they had beaten Baylor, and they probably should have beaten Baylor from what we saw from them against a backup quarterback in Ole Miss. So I think that they came back and showed a lot of heart, and from a Notre Dame perspective, it seems like everything is kind of falling apart in a sense. You lost your coach. Hopefully who comes in is going to be good. I know that the players were happy with that.
With Marcus Freeman. Yeah. And I actually disagree with you on a bit. This game is the one game that went exactly how I predicted it would. I thought Notre Dame would go out with fight with Marcus Freeman, but I thought he's a great hire. He's going to go great long term, but I think in putting him into this bowl game mid-season or at the end of the season with this team would not be good. I think he needs his recruits. Oklahoma State was the better team. They went out and won. Terrible collapse in the second half. Notre Dame had no secondary whatsoever. We don't need to talk about that much, though. It was just a bad loss in the end. Yeah. Notre Dame will be fine long term. Peach Bowl, Michigan State 31, Pitt 21. As you said, a lot of players sat out. Kenny Pickett, Kenneth Walker, and Pitt's backup QB then got hurt too. Sorry if you had Pitt plus 3.5 or Pitt in betting.
That was pretty bad.
That was a pretty bad beat. But Michigan State covered there and won by 10. And finally, the Music City Bowl. I thought best bowl game out there. Purdue 48, Tennessee 45 in overtime. What do you think of that call at the end?
I thought, first off, it was such an entertaining game. Yeah. I thought that
it was so back and forth at the end.
There was so much going on. I don't remember what the score was exactly after the first half, but it was something crazy.
Something big. Yeah, and Hendon Hooker showed up there for Tennessee, their quarterback, but they still lost. What I think about that call at the end, everyone's talking about, there was forward progress by a Tennessee running back on 4th and goal. They needed a touchdown there to win the game, and they called him down, even though he kept running, getting in. And I thought they shouldn't have blown the whistle, shouldn't have called forward progress. It would have been a touchdown. But I do agree that you can't reverse forward progress because people maybe stop playing. I don't know. That was a horrible call.
I agree that forward progress isn't something that you can go back and review and say, oh, never mind.
I think they should have waited longer.
I do think they should wait longer, and I think forward progress as a whole has a lot of flaws, as we saw with that.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of good, but there's also some bad.
I've always been a fan of you play until someone's down, and wherever he's down, he goes. If you push him back 20 yards, maybe they're down there. So I don't know. Let's move on to the NBA. This is going to be our last topic. Kyrie Irving is on track to return Wednesday. Klay Thompson on Sunday. Let's start with Kyrie. What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
I think it really doesn't make sense. To have a player only be allowed to play away games just doesn't seem right. I feel like he should either be a part of the team or shouldn't be. And I wish Kyrie was able to play fully. I love him as a player. I think that what he's doing off the court is a little crazy. But he understands that it's his decision, and if that's the decision he wants to make, then so be it. But I am still happy to see him play.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I've been outspoken on this issue all year. At the beginning of the year, I said I don't think he's going to play this year, or at least he definitely won't get vaccinated just to play. And I think this is really weak move by the Nets. To have your player not play at home because he won't get vaccinated, and it's not even on his opinions. It's not even a political thing, what I'm saying. It's just a weak move by Brooklyn.
Yeah.
To give in to Kyrie's thing. It felt like a stalemate between the teams, in addition to Kyrie versus, like, the government. So I thought it was a weak move to say you could play half the games and kind of give in. So I don't like that at all. I have more opinions on that. We'll get into it. We'll see how he plays. Do you think it affects their team chemistry? Because people are saying that. Because I think it can't hurt them as a team. That's the one thing I am in favor of.
You know, he said it himself that he's been staying in game shape by going to gyms and things like that. And I think a player like Kyrie Irving isn't going to hurt your team even if he can only play half the games. Kevin Durant said he's still Kyrie Irving, and if he only plays half the games, and for those 50% of games, we're going to look so much better because he really will help their team.
Yeah, but I feel terrible for Patty Mills.
I do as well.
He's looked great all year. He's earned a spot on that team, and now he's going to, at home, have to start and be that star, and on the road just lose his minutes. Those are the players I feel bad for and why the organization looks weak.
That does put him in a really weird position, seeing him against the Lakers flourish, and on Christmas Day, I thought he was the best player out of all of them.
Yeah, I know we were both there, and I was not too happy with the result. We'll see if the Lakers can bounce back later. We won't get into them today. I feel like we talk about them every week. Let's move on to the other California team, the other relevant one, at least, at Clippers. Klay Thompson for the Warriors coming back. He hasn't played in 2 years. How much of an impact will he have for the team right off the jump?
I think he's going to have a really big impact. Steve Kerr said they're not going to limit his minutes or anything. Once he's ready, he's ready. And I think that from what we've seen from the clips of him shooting with Steph, I know he made 24 threes in a row right before their game. I think he's going to come in and make a huge impact. He's not a player that I think those injuries will really affect his game style because he wasn't jumping with his head above the rim or anything like that. I think he'll still be able to be a great player.
Yeah, but I don't know. For some reason, I haven't heard the word Splash Brothers a lot. People forget what their origin was. In 2015, the two of them just hitting threes nonstop. So I think you can still do that. And I don't think this leg injury affects that ability too much. Obviously, he will get all those minutes. So from that standpoint, he'll have a chance to make that impact. But I think off the jump, he might have struggles. He hasn't played. I know they've really eased him back so well. And it's made me think if I was an injured NBA player, the team I'd want to be on is the Warriors. But I still think playing against the top of the top, playing defense, he'll have to ease into it a bit. It's not even that his knee will hurt. It's just that he hasn't played in the NBA in 2 years.
Yeah, and something that I do think will help that is, I think the coaching staff around him is so good, and they have really handled this situation amazingly. And I think Jordan Poole has really stepped up as well.
And Gary Payton II.
Gary Payton II is looking like a lockdown defender like his dad. It's really
the glove.
Cool to see. I think that he'll have the supporting cast he needs while he's transitioning into playing in real NBA games because there's nothing that can really compare, even like scrimmaging in practice. It's not the same.
But in my opinion, the only thing I have to say about it is I'm not worried about his health that much. I think he's fine. And I'm not worried about the staff not playing him enough. It's just about him playing in NBA games after he hasn't in 2 years. Let's move on to another conversation. DeMar DeRozan's been playing out of his mind. Bulls are on an 8-game win streak, the first place in the East. John Morant on the, conversely, 5-game win streak, fourth in the West. But in that 5-game win streak, they've beaten Brooklyn on the road, they've beaten Phoenix, and they've beaten a Lakers team where LeBron put up like 37 points. He had 40 in that game, Ja. Those two guys, are they in the MVP conversation?
I think that it's hard to say right now. If the season ended today, sadly, I don't think we could say so because they both missed time, which I think really hinders your ability to win the MVP, especially because we've only been through around half the season. But when they have looked healthy and been able to play, in the case of DeRozan with COVID, I think that they have looked incredible, and they were the main reasons the team has looked so great for both of them, especially Ja in that instance. So if he can keep it up, I think he could be in the playoff contention, and I do think it's going to be hard for DeMar because he is sharing the spotlight with Zach LaVine, and they have pretty similar numbers, so I think it's kind of difficult for him to be in the MVP.
Yeah, I think to say conversation is a big word. I think a lot of guys could be in it, so yes, conversation, but here's how I really see it. I think Steph Curry's above them. I think KD's above them. I think Giannis and Jokic. My point on the whole conversation is that I don't think Stephen Curry is still my favorite. I don't know who is, but he's hit this slump of late. It seems like the last month, and I've not liked what I saw out of him. Kevin Durant's looked good all year. I really like what I've seen out of Jokic. He's had an insane, I think, PER. Giannis has also been great. I think the Bucks are still the best team in the East. All 4 of them are above. I'd put DeMar as the 5, Ja as the 6. The reason I don't love Ja as much in this conversation, even though he's insane, as a team, they went 10-2 when he was off the court, and they're 14-12 on the court. I think you need to have a great team to be in the conversation. Yes, they're 4th in the West, but that happened over a 12-game stretch with them going 10-2 without him. So I think that's an interesting stat that's going to hold him back all year. I'm most excited now to get into our all-star predictions. This can be interesting. Last thing for our final NFL Week 18 predictions. Dylan, do you want to start by running through your West?
I'd be happy to. So for my first starting point guard, I have Stephen Curry. I think that he deserves to be there completely. Yeah. He's still in the MVP consideration, even though
he's still the favorite in books.
Even though he kind of has fallen off a little bit with his play ever since the talk of him breaking the record kind of got introduced into the headlines is when I feel like that started. But I still think he deserves to be there. Has had a great season, and the Warriors look great. My other guard, I have Donovan Mitchell. I think you could put Ja Morant there, but with him missing time and Donovan Mitchell having pretty similar stats and also a successful team, him and Rudy Gobert together have looked great. I would put him. And for my front court, I have LeBron. I think he is still
LeGoat,
exactly. I think he's looking like the best player in the world a lot of the time. He's played so well in the last stretch of games, and I think that without him, that team would look even more abysmal. So I think he deserves to be there. I also have Jokic, who's playing like an MVP. I think that all of his advanced stats show that he is maybe the deserving player for the MVP award. And I think he totally deserves to be there. And then the tough one for me was that third front court member, but I went with Gobert.
Yeah.
He's been such a good defensive player, and he's shooting very efficiently, even though he's not a great scorer. But his rebounding and defensive and blocking ability, I think, gives him a spot there.
Yeah, so in the West, I had a lot of similarities with you. I had Curry, I had Jokic, I talked about him and saying this. And now, of course, I have LeBron. He has looked insane to me the past 2 weeks. It's a shame the Lakers have been so bad without him, or even with him there, and I've tweeted about it. The rest of the team's awful. Like, the only guys I'd say keep, 1 LeBron, 2 Carmelo Anthony. I would sneak Anthony Davis in as a 3 and Malik Monk. No one else I think is even worth keeping. I'd trade Horton Tucker, get Jeremy Grant, get anything. So that's that. My difference is I have Ja Morant instead of Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell I think has been so underrated, but what we've seen out of Ja, especially the last 6 games, utterly insane. I snuck him in there. But I used to have, I was thinking about Luka Doncic maybe.
Yeah.
My front court, I haven't seen any of this at all. I know you were actually considering it, and I was surprised to see it. Jonas Valanciunas. I know the team hasn't done well. I know everyone's obsessed with Gobert. He's shooting great from the field. He's great defensively, and the team is great. Let me tell you about Valanciunas. 18.7 points a game, 12 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He has 3 more points than Gobert, 3 less rebounds, another assist and a half. On top of that, he's shooting 45% from 3. That's the 3rd best in all of the NBA of players that have played more than half season. I know Joe Harris is first, but I think he's played half the games. So 3rd best, and that's as a center. On top of that, shooting 82% from the line compared to Gobert's 68. I think he's just a better all-around player. Yes, Gobert's Defensive Player of the Year. Yes, Gobert might be better, but Valanciunas is having a better season. I know his team is worse. I got to go with Valanciunas, and I want to get him into that All-Star game so bad. I don't want his stats to go unnoticed.
I totally agree. I've been following him pretty
closely.
Yeah, thank you. And because he's on my fantasy basketball team, and his stats have gone pretty unnoticed because he's on the Pelicans and they're a really bad team this year. Zion's not even playing, so...
Yeah, but I feel like every ballot I see on Twitter has Gobert. They're like, think about Valanciunas. I know I could... you were, right there on the fence, so...
So, I think Valanciunas, his ability to stretch the floor is something Gobert just doesn't have at all.
And he'd be more fun.
It would be a lot more fun. Gobert's not the most...
fun player to watch. I don't like Gobert. I really don't like him. A couple
blocks here and there, but besides that, not that fun, I think.
And I'd love to see a first-time All-Star on top of it.
I do think Valanciunas will definitely make it, but I understand the argument for him to be a starter
I hope he makes it. How about the East? Get to the East.
So for my East, I have the Bull backcourt. I don't know if there's a little favoritism in that, but I think DeRozan and LaVine have both looked incredible. They've played off each other so well. You could say Trae Young because his stats have looked incredible as well, but his team success has not been there in
12th.
That same way. And so for that reason, I think LaVine and DeRozan, and I think it's also kind of hard to say who's been looking better DeRozan's had those 2 buzzer beaters, and for that has been getting a lot of the attention, but their stats are pretty similar. So it's hard for me to go one or the other, so I just decided both. I also have Kevin Durant there. I think he's definitely in the MVP consideration right now. He looks incredible with Kyrie out, with help from James Harden as well. They've looked so good still. I think he totally deserves to be there. I also have Giannis there. Same thing as KD. He's looked incredible again as well. I think that they could be a contender again. And then my last front court member is Joel Embiid. I think that he's looked really good, and I love to watch him play.
Yeah, in the front court, I have the same 3 guys. Kevin Durant, Giannis, probably 2 of the top 4 guys in the NBA. And I wanted to go with someone else in the front court than Embiid.
Yeah.
Because I really haven't thought Embiid's been insane this year. He's been missed sometime, I think. But I had to go with him just because no one else is that great. I almost want to Tatum, but backcourt. Trae Young is my first guy. I know the team hasn't been good, but his stats alone, I think, are so much better than DeRozan and Levine. DeRozan and Levine are each averaging like 26 or 7 and 5 assists. He's averaging 28 and 9.5 assists. That's a lot better. I know he's the number 1 player on the team, so he gets help there, but I just think he's been so much better. And when you talk about the top upcoming guards in the NBA, you say, okay, Steph's still the best, Dame's up there. It's Ja, Trae Young, LaMelo. So I have to go Trae Young. Up until a week ago, my second guard, I was going to come on here. I was super excited. I wrote it down. And I was going to come saying James Harden because he has 9 assists and 9 rebounds a game, I think. He's almost averaging a triple-double as opposed to DeRozan. But this week I switched it to DeMar DeRozan because the Bulls have been better. And his 2 buzzer beaters swayed me, and he is averaging more points. And just the eye test. I got to, at some point, stop looking at these stats. DeMar DeRozan has looked better. He's been more improved. I think he deserves it more, even though James Harden's better with the assists and rebounds. It's because he has Kevin Durant right there. James Harden, if he was in Houston, though, I will say, or if he was on the number 1 player on his team, he would still be averaging north of 30 and be an MVP player. And he can do that, but he hasn't because they have Durant there. So I will go with DeRozan.
The one thing that's kind of swayed me from Harden, I love how he plays. He has been kind of inefficient and in that sense with scoring, a little like iffy. I know that he is sharing the load with James Harden, or with Kevin Durant, so that makes it a little different. I do agree that if he was on the Rockets still by himself, he would be in MVP considerations, probably averaging like 32 points. But I could say the same thing, I think, for DeRozan and Levine with how they're playing.
Oh, no.
I know
DeRozan, with the eye test, their team's been better. He's been better. We'll stick with that. Final thing, we're going to go to our final NFL Week 18 predictions. We're going to run it through real quickly. We'll start. There's 2 games on Saturday. Dylan, Chiefs at Broncos. Who you got?
I got the Chiefs. I think that they're the better team. I think the Broncos are kind of in a disarray. Like, who's going to be their quarterback going forward? There's a lot of questions there. Definitely the Chiefs.
Agreed. Chiefs are the better team. It's not even close. The next game, Cowboys at Eagles, Saturday night game. Who you got?
I think it's going to be interesting. I think that both teams really don't like each other, and it's going to make it a good game, but they're not playing for that much, besides maybe who they play and the Cowboys' home field advantage in the second round of the playoffs, maybe. But I think that I like the Cowboys still. I think they are the better team, and they're going to want to bounce back again.
Yeah, the spread here is 7. Yeah. This might upset the week. I'm going with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to win this outright. They've looked better to me lately, and the Cowboys have looked horrible. It's going to be cold there, and I do think the Cowboys, although they have more weapons, I think the Eagles show up big time. I think Jalen Hurts shows up. I know he's kind of in a feud right now with Washington. They're all security staff and the things coming down. So we'll see if he can get focused on football and win this game. I think he can.
Yeah.
We'll do the Bears then. Let's get for the Battle of Ohio. Cincinnati at Cleveland.
I think Cincinnati comes out and wins. I think that they are the better team this year. Baker just showed that he is really lackluster. And I think that Joe Burrow's played 2 of the best games by any player this year back-to-back. I don't see why he slows down. Jamar Chase looks so good, like the best rookie receiver we've seen in forever, besides maybe Justin Jefferson.
And let me warn about some of these games. A lot of players could be sitting out, so it's weird to predict. But I think the Bengals will play their guys because they want to get seeding. They still have a chance to 1 seed, even though they won't get it.
The Browns will sit some of their.
The Browns are sitting Baker actually because he's hurt. So give me the Bengals that big time in Cleveland. They'll go ruin the crowd's day. Green Bay at Detroit, NFC North battle. Probably gonna see players sit. Who you got?
Yeah, I think that it'll honestly be a closer game than you'd expect because I doubt Rodgers or Adams or any of them play, but I still like the Packers. I think that they're a better team. They don't like the Detroit Lions at all. There's a rivalry there. I think Dan Campbell might pull some tricks out of his sleeve and make it a close game, but I like the Packers.
Yeah, I think the Packers are going to bench Aaron Jones and start A.J. Dillon. We're going to see a huge day out of him. But give me Detroit. Give me the Fighting Dan Campbells. I think it's a bad decision to win. Go for the draft pick, but I think they'll find a way to win because Detroit always does the worst possible thing. Washington at the Giants, another irrelevant game. Draft picks, I guess.
I think that it is a pretty irrelevant game. Washington's had some non-football issues they've had to deal with, but I still think they're the better team out of the two. I think that if they had been healthy, they could have been maybe a 7th seed.
Yeah, and we're going to end today, by the way, with an interesting Washington name prediction, but we'll get to that next. I want the Giants to win this game so they have a worse draft pick. I'm a Giants hater. Bears beat them this week. Great win. But Washington will take this game, sadly, and earn that worst draft pick. We already talked about we think the Colts are going to beat the Jaguars. How about Steelers, Ravens, and Big Ben's last game unless a miracle happens?
I think that the Ravens are going to be the ones that win that game. I think that both teams are going to put it all on the line. I think that hopefully Lamar comes back. We get to see him, and I do not think they lose. It's a bummer for me to see Big Ben's maybe last game be a loss, and especially after how he was able to win at Heinz Field. I wish that had been in his last game for sure. But I like the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm tempted to go with the Steelers because the Ravens haven't looked good. But I think Lamar's going to come back. And they did surprise me by keeping it close with the Rams. I like the Steelers. I love what Najee did last week. It was utterly insane. But I'm going with the Ravens here at home. Titans-Texans in the AFC South battle. I think we both think the Titans are going to win this game with ease to clinch that 1 seed. But don't hate on Davis Mills.
I think Davis Mills has looked like maybe the best quarterback out of that rookie draft class so far.
I could get behind that. I think he could be their long-term guy if they get rid of Deshaun Watson this offseason. We talked about Saints-Falcons. How about Jets-Bills?
I think
Jets almost pulled off an upset last week.
The
Think they
Jets
could do it?
almost did pull off an upset. I think that they're looking better than they were. I think that their quarterback situation is starting to play out a little better than it was in the earlier season, I feel like. But I still do not think that the Bills are going to let them win that game. They're playing for seeding, things like that.
The Bills they're playing to win their division. They're going to put it all on the line, smoke the Jets. Give me them by 20.
I think that's pretty easy.
Definitely. Niners-Rams, we both kind of talked about this one. How about Patriots-Dolphins?
I think that the Patriots are also playing for the division. They're not going to want to lose, but I think that the Dolphins are a decent team. It depends on how their offense does. They're offensively just not that good, so it's hard for me to say that the Dolphins are going to win. And their 7-game win streak was against some pretty bad teams, so I was never really that sold on them, so I have the Patriots.
Yeah, and their streak was snapped last week, but give me the Fins. I've been a fan of the Dolphins all year. I think I said at the beginning of the year they'd win this game for playoff hopes. They are eliminated, sadly, but I think the Patriots are going to think this is an easy game and lose, and Bill Belichick's going to use it as motivation to do well in the playoffs. Give me the Fins here, though, in an upset, winning by a field goal. Seahawks-Cardinals. This game, no meaning for the Seahawks, surprisingly. We haven't seen that often, but the Cardinals are playing for seeding. Who you got?
I kind of like the Seahawks. I feel like there is no meaning for them. It depends on who they actually play. If they play fully, though, and you would hope to see them do that because who knows how many more games Russell Wilson's going to play in a Seahawks jersey.
Could be the last one.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they could beat them. I feel like the Cardinals have looked really disappointing, and they got really lucky against the Cowboys, and I do not think they're that legit, and I think that if the Seahawks had maintained health throughout the year, they could have gotten it rolling and looked like a pretty good team. So
yeah, I don't think that's going to go that way. I think the Cardinals will take this one, the closer one than people think. Yeah. But Seahawks just aren't as good of a team as the Cardinals. It comes down to that. Panthers at the shorthanded Buccaneers. First game's the whole Antonio Brown thing. Who you got?
I still like the Buccaneers. I think that they're going to win that game. I feel like Tom Brady is not going to let that really affect the locker room. And I don't know what's exactly going on in there, but I still like them. I think they're by far the better team. Carolina's not playing for anything at all.
Yeah. I'm angry with Carolina. I said they'd make the playoffs at the start of the year, and their quarterback situation is what ruined it. Cam Newton's officially done. So Sam Darnold. Honestly, anyone who steps into that uniform's really just gone downhill. Give me the Bucs in that game. Game of the week. Chargers at Raiders. Sunday Night Football. Winner gets in the playoffs. Loser probably doesn't. Unless the Colts lose, then they'll play for a tie, which will suck, because if they tie, they both get in. Who you got, though? They're playing for the playoffs, seeing in Allegiant Stadium in Vegas.
This is a really tough game. I think that both teams are really good with the John Madden stuff that's happened. I'd love to see the Raiders win. It was good to see them win right after that as well. But I think that the Chargers are the better team. I know that the Raiders have had another issue with a DUI, so that locker room's probably a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
I think Derek Carr is trying to keep things together, but that must be really tough. And I feel like the Chargers are the better team, and even though they're playing in Las Vegas, I would say the Chargers.
Yeah, the thing is that the Raiders have had these locker room issues all year. I'm not worried about it. They've overcome it all year long, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think the Raiders are going to keep it close. The Chargers haven't looked great, but I just want to shout out the Chargers offensive coordinator, I think Joe Lombardi. He's had some great formations, great play calling to get Keenan Allen open this year. He has 100 receptions, and I think the Chargers are going to take this game with a late Keenan Allen touchdown. It's going to be a great game, and I really want to see the Chargers win and get into the playoffs. I think they're a more interesting team. They have those skill position weapons. I think they'll get the job done and make it. Before we go, this is the real game of the week. Bears at Vikings. Dylan, I know this kind of breaks up your household. Who do you think's going to take it? Bears final game of the year.
Neither team is playing for much, except that I think the Bears are going to be the team that wins because they're playing to worsen the Giants draft pick.
That's all I need.
That excites me as a Giant hater as well, and I feel like with the Bears not playing as the Vikings are to have a better draft pick, I think that they'll come out and win.
Yeah, I said 2 weeks ago, my favorite thing in football is the Bears worsening the Lions draft pick, or the Giants draft pick. We've won 2 games in a row. Whoever quarterback we send out there, we're going to win. Justin Fields is the future. Andy Dalton won this week.
Exactly.
Nick Foles is probably the best one in that whole room.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see him go back out there, raise his trade value, so we could trade back into the first round, because we all know that's what Nick Foles is really worth. Bears are going to go into Minnesota, embarrass them in their home stadium last game of the year. Bear down. We're taking that one. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Dylan Floor for filling in for Brandon. We'll both be here next week to preview the NFL playoffs. Super pumped, and thank you all for listening. Hope you had a happy holidays.
Thank you.